All right, good afternoon, everybody. My clock says 2 p.m., and so I will call this meeting of the Washington County School District Board Policy Committee to order, and we will start with our roll call. Madam Clerk.
President Angela Taylor.
I'm here, thank you.
Vice President Ellen Minetto.
I'm here.
Clerk Diane Nicolette. Here. Oh, I'm supposed to say here? Oh, sorry. Trustee Calvert.
Here.
Trustee Church.
Here.
Trustee Rodriguez.
Here.
And Trustee Smith.
Here.
And we have a full house. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll go right into our items for presentation. We're going to start with agenda item 2.01. Approval of the minutes from the April 2021 Board Policy Committee meeting for possible action. If there are no objections, why don't we go ahead and open agenda items 2.01 through 2.03 since they're all pertaining to minutes of previous board policy meetings. Okay, if there's some discussion. If not, I'm looking for a motion for approval of agenda items 2.01, 02, and 03. Okay, moved by Trustee Calvert. Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Vice President Minetto. No discussion. Any public comment on those items? Jean, any public comment on those first ones?
There's no public comment.
Okay, thank you very much. All those in favor of approving agenda items 2.01, 2, and 3, please indicate so by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? All right, the motion carries. Let the record show that it is unanimous. We'll go right down to 2.04. Discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and or forward the proposed revisions of Board Policy 4110. This is talent acquisition, specifically to update formatting and to clarify language to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval. And this is for possible action. Before I turn it over to our Chief HR Officer, Ms. Ellison, just for our new trustees, there's a couple of trustees, this is your first policy meeting. So just from a process standpoint, typically here we'll have, we'll discuss the agenda items. Staff has typically made recommendations for our revisions, or proposed revisions, and those are in our packet, how it stands, and their proposed revisions. And this is when we have a conversation about language, about intent, anything like that that may or may not make sense to you. The board policies, all of them are on, it's a 2-year calendar, right? It's a 2-year rotation? Yes. 2-year rotation, so that they just automatically come up. And typically, the superintendents make sure they get to the particular chief in areas where board policies, where they live, so to speak, for usually there are updates pertaining to either laws change or practices change, or we don't even have that program anymore change, right? You know, some of those things we've heard of laws that's been around since like the 50s and 60s is like, what the heck? And we don't want that to be us. And so that's why there is a 2-year calendar, so this will continually happen. But again, this is when we get probably a little more weedy in it, because as we're talking from a language standpoint, and what happens from here, if something gets, if there's substantial recommendations here, we may send it back to staff. That's one option that we have. If they're sometimes grammatical, sometimes things that are not really substantive, then we can approve them as recommended, or as we change them here, we can certainly make changes here. And then if approved here from the policy committee, then it goes on to the Board of Trustees. At the Board of Trustees meeting, usually the first reading is on consent. Am I right?
Second reading.
The second reading is on consent. Usually the first one that comes, we have a discussion. That's where I had that backwards. And if approved at the board level, more changes can be made if necessary. You get public comment on all the things that we typically do before we take action. Okay, and then if approved at the board meeting, then it doesn't mean it's policy yet. It goes out for a 13-day public comment period. And then there are emails that are sent out to staff, particular committees that may be involved. If they haven't weighed in, they get an opportunity. They're reached out to specifically to weigh in on it, and then they can provide their feedback and their input on it. So then it's a 13-day review period, because then it comes up at the following Board of Trustees meeting. Then, if approved, and then at that time, if there are comments from staff, community, students, parents, whatever the case may be, we can have a conversation at that time. Same thing, substantive changes, then we'll send that back to staff. Things that don't make a substantive change, we can approve it. Then after that 13-day period, it needs to be voted on again. Then, should it be approved at that point, it becomes policy. Kind of give you a little background, maybe a little reminder for all the rest of us too, okay? All right, that being said, Ms. Ellison, please go ahead.
All right, thank you, President Taylor, Superintendent McNeil, members of the board. I think that was a helpful review for me too, so thank you for that. Trying to remember the process. As we review 5 policies from the human resources area today, I think that you will notice a theme. The majority of the changes being proposed are really kind of in 3 buckets. So either formatting or language convention adoption based on the chosen format of board policies, or minor immaterial editorial changes, or clarifying language changes where appropriate. So, Board Policy 4110, talent acquisition, is intended to provide the framework through which the district conducts our talent acquisition efforts. In this first section, and I'll just kind of go section by section to walk through the modifications. The first section, our purpose statement, is a statement, of course, of commitment to our workforce strategy that is designed to meet our current and future workforce needs through equitable and consistent procedures. You'll notice that the modifications there are minor editorial modifications, the addition of the word board in front of policy, for example. And then the addition of a definition section is consistent with the adopted formatting of board policies moving forward. I'll periodically look up, so if there's lights I can stop, but please don't hesitate to interrupt me if need be. In the policy section, this is really a broad statement of our goals around talent acquisition, and you'll notice in section E, and I say this all the time, all of our employees are talent scouts, and so we hope that every employee will take the opportunity to recruit whenever possible. We weren't recommending any changes there. In the next section, section 2, you'll see the addition of the word 40 to accompany the numeric reference. And then in section 3, there's guidance provided to the superintendent in terms of procedural direction through administrative regulation. We're not proposing any changes to that section or to the section 4 that outlines the type of employees that should be included in our workforce strategy. Section 5 is really focused on the key partnerships with higher education that can supplement our talent acquisition efforts. And again, we are not proposing any changes in that section or in section 6, which emphasize a commitment to equitable and consistent procedures. In section 7, this is where guidance regarding changes to the direct reports of the superintendent occurs. So this document provides the process for which the board will be notified if there are going to be changes with respect to the superintendent's direct report leadership team. And again, you'll just kind of notice the wording doesn't make any material changes, but it just reads a little bit better for the purposes of clarity. The change in section A, and you'll see this throughout, the reference to board instead of trustees. Again, in some subsections there. And then the most substantial material change after that is the deletion of section 9 on page 4. And the reason for that is that it is redundant to board policy 9070 section 2, which already affords this authority to the superintendent. Under legal requirements and associated documents, again, non-substantial changes, either clarifying or making editorial corrections. Outside of that, we were not proposing any substantial changes. This board policy was updated in 2020 when we added the language around notification to the board for superintendent hires, and so we had pretty rich discussion at that time, and I think from a board policy level, this provides important guidance to our team in terms of the scope of our efforts and focus.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Ellison. Do we have public comment on this one?
I don't have any public comment.
None on this one, thank you. Okay, we'll bring it back here to the board. She took a really good kind of a walkthrough, if you will. Most of them are formatting, other areas of consistency, and so on. Those are the changes that have been recommended by Ms. Ellison and her team. But this time for board discussion. Discussion from the board. Ms. Trustee Smith.
Thank you so much, President Taylor. Hello, Ms. Ellison. So this is my very first policy meeting, and so my question is more so around my education. When these initial suggestions are made, do they go through the legal department before they actually come to the board?
Yeah, so thankfully we have significant support from the Office of General Counsel, and Neil's team has been great in terms of originating the review process, and they actually send us a version that has been vetted and formatted to the adopted convention. We make some more changes, then it goes back to legal for additional review. It probably has some stops along the way, and then we come here. So yes.
Thank you for teaching me that.
That was good for all of us, Trustee Smith. Trustee Church?
Thank you. You knew I was going to have stuff to say on this, and
This is your area.
this is my area. I've been very vocal in some of my thoughts. And the first thing, I think it's a good policy overall. No, no major issues. I think it's extremely important that Ms. Ellison said it's a framework. In other words, this is not a how-to book on how to recruit. This is the policy that guides any strategy. I do have. So let's start off with page 4 or 5, number 8. And this talks about if a trustee has a concern about an offer of employment.
I'm sorry, hang on. Let me find
Sure.
where you are.
8.
I'm on page 4.
And page 4, so 8 starts at 3. 8.
I think his pages are formatted differently on the computer.
Oh, I was going to say, because it's not for okay. It's not tracking with what I have, but I got it. It's on the screen, so I'm good. Thank you, Trustee Church.
8.
Yep.
B.I. So my question is, the trustee has a concern about a contingent offer of employment, and he tells the board president and superintendent within 5 days, he or she, pardon me. What happens then? It doesn't state what happens. Did I miss something? In other words, as far as I'm concerned, it should be go to a board hearing, but a regular board meeting.
I think if I can jump in, I think if you go up to B, it says in the event that one or more trustees has a concern about the contingent offer, leadership team member based upon the superintendent's request from the trustee may be made to review the offer. You see that? Does that answer your question in B, or did I miss that?
Okay, so I'm just confirming how I interpret there, because then we have I that says you tell the board president or superintendent. So what's that saying is it will be. In other words, the board president doesn't have the authority to say, no, we're not going to hear it.
To say we aren't going to hear it? No, these aren't. This policy doesn't say that the hiring decisions from the superintendent come before the board. They're not our decisions as a board. They're the superintendent's decisions, right? Those employees work for her, not for us, as you know, right? So we don't have. This isn't the intention of this, and this is some of the changes that we made. I think it was in 2020, and maybe even a little bit before then. What was to not that the board has approval authority, but that the board certainly gets notification and has an opportunity to say, hey, I have a problem with hiring Angie in X capacity or whatever the case may be. But the intention of this was not to say that those hiring decisions must be approved by us.
Well, again, maybe legal can help me out here. It says under B, above I, under B, the trustee may be made to review the offer of employment as an agenda item during a future meeting of the board So what purpose is that if we don't have any decision-making authority? I'm totally confused.
I mean, maybe legal can weigh in. Were you going to respond to that? Well, let's hear from legal and then go forward. And thank you. I missed that part about it can be on the agenda. I missed that part, Trustee Church. Thank you. I still don't think I'm still positive the intention wasn't to say we get to hire these folks. I'm clear on. But let's see what legal has to say, and we can talk through it.
When this was drafted, it was regarding concerns of nepotism and relationships that existed at a very high level without appropriate appropriate, what's the term I'm looking for, walling off of each other. So the purpose is that if the board has identified that there's an issue, the board can consider it, and they need to look at it from a perspective of 281A, looking for those type of, 281A is your ethics laws, looking for nepotism and things of that nature. That's what it's designed for. This isn't the board saying, I don't like person A. It's, I don't like person A because person A presents a problem to the district for the following reasons. And I do think, at least it's my understanding when we drafted this, that the board can say to the superintendent, we don't want you to hire that person. Ultimately, by contract, she still has the discretion, but I think it would be kind of ridiculous for the superintendent to go forward with the hiring if the board took a vote not to, that this was a bad hire. I would think she or he would be doing so at their own peril. So that was the purpose on how this was drafted and the reasons that this even came about. And to be clear, though, and I want to be very clear, this was a circumstance that did not exist ever under the current superintendent. This is from the previous superintendent and the people that was brought with her, because I know some false allegations have been made about the current superintendent and her relationship with the former budget director. That's not what this is discussing. What this is discussing is you bringing your friends here and creating a work environment that's inappropriate.
So it sounds like both of those, if I may, it sounds like both of those, that it can be requested from a trustee to say, hey, I want to talk about this as an agenda, for an example. And just speaking as the person who's currently the president now, I would say the same thing. 2 trustees will have to have similar concerns. There will still have to be 2 people. I think just to make sure that we're staying consistent. And let's say if 2 trustees said, nope, we don't want to hire Angie, for an example. And not because we don't like Angie's pink dress, but, for some legitimate reasons, if you will. And then if it's 2 trustees, it would be on the agenda. And then so it sounds like it would be an agenda item, and the board could still vote, but the authority still lies with the superintendent. But obviously, you want to use a little wisdom around that. So I was off on that a little bit. So that's kind of half right, half wrong for me. Okay, I saw Trustee Rodriguez and then Vice President Manello, then back to you, Trustee Church, I think.
Yeah, no, so just so I understand, because I know normally to put an agenda item, you need 2 trustees, doesn't matter whomever. But in this situation, it actually sounds like, so if a particular trustee does have an issue, it can be brought up within 5 days and whatnot, and it will, I think the only thing actually I would like to see would be shall, or not maybe, but be put on as an agenda item, a future agenda item, if there was a concern about a particular nepotism case or something like that. But
if I may just offer a little bit of additional commentary, I think to build on what Neil was saying, the thinking was the superintendent identifies a candidate that she'd like to make a conditional offer to, discloses information meant to satisfy any concerns that may exist about relationships or financial interests or that sort of thing. The board then has an opportunity to review that information, raise the hand and say if there's a concern, but the may language was used because there is a defined process in another board policy for how to get something on an agenda. So that was the nexus. And then just to answer your earlier question, Trustee Church, I think the ordering of B and then I was intended to say, okay, if you have a concern, you want to raise your hand, that's described in B, and then I defines the time frame in which that needs to happen.
Okay, you want to respond, Council, and then we'll. Did that answer your question, Trustee Rodriguez?
well, no, I mean, I think in a situation like this, I do like that you don't necessarily need 2 trustees. If there's that type of sort of concern, I do like the idea that you only need 1. And I think the only thing I would like to see an improvement on with that, the whole, it may be made to review. I think if trustees knew that this will be reviewed, just the wording in there.
Okay.
The legal wording of, it shall be put on future agenda item.
Okay, so those are really the same thing. It's may because of the 2, but you're saying it should only be 1, so let's make it shall.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? Okay, all right.
some food for that.
Yeah, that's something that's out there. That's what the conversation is for. We'll go back to council, then Vice President Manetto, and then back to Trustee Church.
Yeah, and on what Trustee Rodriguez said, it as it reads right now, it is the request of one trustee. This is an exception to our normal process because it says in the event that one or more trustee has a concern. So I just want to point that out. So if we do want it to be two trustees, we can certainly make it that way. But we did it this way when we drafted this a couple years ago on purpose. So it is a one request. And then if we change the shall language after trustee, we would need to reword that a little bit. If we change the may be made language to a shall language, we'll probably have to reword that a little bit. But we can do that if that's the board's desire.
It sounds to me like, correct me if I'm wrong, Trustee Rodriguez, that you aren't as much hung up, so to speak, on the shall, but really on the, hey, one trustee should be able to bring this forward. Whatever that means to say, am I getting what your intention is?
Yeah, I mean, it's in a situation I think that could be as important as this. You know, there should be one trustee if there's one trustee has concern, and then so that the trustee knows that this will be heard, not that it may be. You know, 2 years down the line, who knows what's going to, who will be here or whatnot.
Oh yeah, that wouldn't.
So just sets that for the future. Just,
Okay, Vice President Manetto.
Thank you, Madam President. I kind of prefer the two trustees. If I saw something, and then I could say to Clerk Nicolette, I see this. Can you help me see it more clearly? She might be able to talk to me and make me go, oh, I get it. And then it might go the other way. I kind of like the two.
Okay.
I don't know if that's
Okay.
what you all think.
Thank you, Vice President Manetto. Then we'll go to Trustee Church, and then no, your light was on first, and then thank you, sir, and then we'll go to Trustee Smith.
I agree with Trustee Rodriguez. There's a reason they said one or more, and when they drafted this, and I think that's a good decision in this case. And remember, it's very limited here to the leadership team. And I want to be clear, I was thinking as a cop, I'm thinking, what if the person has something in their background, say they're a sex offender, and say that the superintendent says, well, they did their time, I think it's okay. I was not even bizarrely thinking about, anything else, but that's my cop thinking was, I don't care what the reason is. Sometimes the public gets a hold of you and says, this person's not suited. And yeah, that's why I like the one or more. And again, we're only dealing with the leadership team here, as I recall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is just on leadership team. Thank you, Trustee Church. Trustee Smith?
Thank you, President Taylor. So a couple things. One, if I were to read this as a clean version, not the track changes, it actually does read to me perfectly that a single trustee would be able to review the offer and then it would come up. So I don't know if maybe because it's a track changes version, that's tripping up us a little bit. So I actually do read it exactly the way that Trustee Church and Trustee Rodriguez are mentioning. But if a point of clarification could help, in that sentence in B where it says may be made to review the offer of employment as an agenda item, and it will become an agenda item for a future meeting of the board, maybe brings a little bit more like definitive clarity to it. So that's just a suggestion, just kind of throwing it out there. If the policy is for a single trustee to make that recommendation, I don't see a reason to necessarily change that if this was purposefully crafted in that original sense. But again, so I do think it reads the way it is for a single trustee. There is a potential edit if we want it to be even more explicit, and I'm fine with keeping it the way that the policy was originally drafted.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Smith. Counsel, and then the superintendent, then I'd like to make the comment as well, please. Counsel.
So just so I reread this, I didn't know there'd be questions on this, but on B little I, if you read those sections together, which is how they should be read under the rules of statutory construction, what you have is you basically have, as Emily points out, the main statement, which is, hey, a trustee can say we have a concern, I have a concern, and ask for an agenda item. if you look at I, the superintendent can't make an offer of employment to that person, so it has to go on an agenda. Otherwise, she's prohibited from making an offer of employment. So there's no way to get around the agenda requirement because because of the way I reads. If there is no trustee request to review within 5 business days, the superintendent may offer employment to the candidate. Well, if there is one, then they may not, right? I mean, that's the only logical conclusion. So, which requires that it goes on an agenda at some point. So, and what we do right now is pursuant to this policy is a contingent offer for any new leadership team member, and it's contingent upon meeting this 5-day timeline, and the person knows that when they accept. So the process seems to be working pretty well so far. But that's how that reads. But if you want to do more clarification, that's up to the board. But I think it reads that way legally. I think anybody would read it that way.
Thank you, Counsel. Dr. McNeil?
No, thank you very much, President Taylor. And just to follow up on that, so since this policy has been implemented, you all have received, at least the more veteran trustees have received such emails when I have hired a leadership. And I just want to make it very clear, these are LT members, leadership members that report directly to the superintendent. So they report directly to me. We have other leadership team members that report to another chief. So these are only direct reports. And then I would also point out to Chief Counsel's mention on previous administration, part of the issue are the reasons why I ask those 3 questions when I make a conditional offer of employment, because those were concerns brought up by the previous administration. So those are exactly, I wanted to make very clear, those are the reasons why I asked those questions.
You want to point out another questions you're talking about on the previous page?
Correct. So on the top of page, well, my page 4.
Oh, it is, yes, more than the previous page. My page
Yes.
4, too.
So any familiar, personal, or other relationships the selected candidate has with the superintendent, other leadership team members, or board members, I asked that question. All current or former business or property interests the candidate has or had with the district, so I asked that question. And then any outside employment or business opportunities that the candidate may have, and would they be continuing those with their course of employment. So I asked those 3 questions before I offer the contingent offer of employment.
My comment on that is, not on that, but just on this as a whole, is I think it's absolutely appropriate for, should we get to the agenda, to this become an agenda item, I think a will, and it can even be more certain than a future meeting. It can be something that makes it more timely, because an offer is on the line, if you will, right? And then we certainly don't want to drag this thing on. I have to be honest, I have a little bit of a concern about it being one trustee, and the reason, let's say I don't like somebody's political views. Let's say I don't like somebody because myself and a member of their family had a little kerfuffle, to use Judge Judy's word, or whatever the case may be. I think that my mom likes Judge Judy, but I think that these are people that we're talking about. I mean, and that now this is public record, and they come to the meeting, and people can get up and say whatever. And granted, they're leadership team people, but I would like to have something around that it should be based upon those areas of concern, which was the intent of, whether it's nepotism or any of those types, or criminal background will be caught, Trustee Church. So that's not one of those things we have to, because that already happens, because that's critically important. That already happens, but I think I would feel a little more. I don't mind bringing it up, but I would just feel a little more comfortable, because we're talking about people, and it can't just be that I have a personality conflict with somebody, or I don't like their ideologies, or their religion, or their whatever. I'd be a little concerned about that. I mean, right now, we're pretty good, and I think we're having a great discussion and talking about what the issue is in this, but we can't make this decision based upon us as a board, right? Other board members come and go, right? And I'd be concerned about that offer of employment when someone, just because one person doesn't even have to have a reason. They can just say, I want that on an agenda, because I don't like your sister, right? Or whatever. So talk to me, give me some feedback on that.
Well,
Trustee
if
Church?
may I just comment quickly? The
Sure.
current language in B says that a leadership team member based on the superintendent's notification. So that notification contains really specific information about those questions and the candidate and their qualifications. So that does narrow the scope a bit, right? And then I think that council is adding some other suggested language here to focus what types of concerns might be raised.
Okay, I would feel more comfortable with a little more language, but beyond what we have here, just to kind of focus it, and that way we're just, we're kind of clear on that. But Trustee Church wanted to comment, then we'll go to what you're talking about.
I don't interpret notification as limiting it to that. Back to the hypothetical criminal, again, it might not, sure, it gets caught. We just might disagree on whether it's suitable for employment, i.e. the sex offender 20 years ago, well, they did their time. And again, I'm comfortable with the one or more, and I think we do need, because we're arguing it now, I think we need to add shall or must, because then there's no argument. Because even as we sit here today, I think there's a disagreement whether the board president has the authority to take it off the agenda and say no. That said, I do have one question. Could the superintendent basically explain to myself and others what the leadership team would be? Are we talking principals, deputies? Who are we talking?
Leadership team are only direct reports to the superintendent.
Does that help you when you hear it's only direct reports to the
Can
superintendent?
we get some examples?
Do you need more than that?
There's
Can you give more?
22 members on the leadership team. I'm
How many
one,
do you-
Emily's one, chief of accountability, the area superintendents. Come on, I can do it. Deputy superintendent, chief of accountability, chief academics, chief of communications, chief of police. The two lawyers and the department director for civil rights as well. I think I got them all. So that would be it.
Well, and what I would say, just in response to that, Trustee Church, is not so that it is or is not in the purview of the board president. I'm fine with there being more one or more. I just want there to be something. Oh, there it is. Look, Joe pulls it out. So okay.
I ran out of fingers.
But yeah, it's not. I'm fine with it being one trustee. I mean, if we have the one or more, that language is not my concern at all. The concern is the criteria upon which that can be pulled, and I don't know that notification quite gets me there. I just want to make sure. Again, someone's listening. I don't like your political views, so I don't want you to work for the. I don't want to be doing that.
I took the liberty, based off of what you were saying, to adding language, and I actually, from a legal perspective, agree. I probably should have caught this earlier, since I think I probably drafted this originally, but something along the lines of that. So it has a concern that may arise under NRS 281A, which is specific to the questions that Kristen asked. And then I also use the terms character, alleged misconduct, and/or professional competence, because those are the only things that can be considered under NRS 241, which is the open meeting law. And then down below, 3 lines up, I added at the next possible meeting. I put the word in possible because it might not be at the next meeting by the way things fall, right? So if the offer was made on a Friday, the next meeting's on Tuesday, and you put the notice in on Monday, we're not going to make the open meeting law. So it'd be at the next possible meeting. So I think that addresses the president's concerns. And if the way this reads, if the concern doesn't fall under one of those 4, then discretion does rest with the board president to not put it on. But if it does, then it gets on the agenda. That's just the way it goes. I mean, you have to make it fit into the criteria. You can't just say, I don't like Neil or whomever. So.
I just want to be fair to everybody across the board, but I also think something like that would cover, I think, Trustee Church's concern, and maybe someone was a sex offender, and maybe they did their 20-year. That would still be under alleged misconduct or something. That would still, or character. So something. See, I think any of those things. I'm just like, these are people, and I just think we want to be as fair to them as we can. And if any of that stuff comes up, a trustee can pull it and should, and I think that's okay. I don't have a problem with that at all. I mean, I won't be president forever, so it's not like, ooh, the president. It's going to be somebody. Next year, I might be the trustee that wants to do it, right? And so I just want to be able to be fair in that. Trustee Rodriguez, and then I saw you, Trustee Cherokee, and then Trustee Smith.
No, I think with what Chief Counsel put in there, it kind of outlines it a little bit better. But at the same time, I mean, like, I hope we're all adults and we're not nitpicking someone because of the political views or family ties or social circles. I hope that's not the case. And I would argue that if a trustee or multiple trustees did that, it would be open to the public to see that. You know, but I hope that, you know, no one trustee or future trustees would do that. But
I think
as,
more
as
often,
Chief Counsel outlines, I think that's hits all the bases there.
hopes. I mean, and I think more often than not that's absolutely going to be the case. But I don't want, again, I don't want to, if, say I pull somebody because of what I need to have a reason, right? And it can't just be something. I need to have a reason, right? Board president, I need to have a reason, just out of fairness to that person, right? Across the board. Trustee Church and then Trustee Smith.
I love it with one exception, and that was Trustee Smith's previous comment about the word shall. I'd still like to see General Counsel figure out a way to put the word shall in there for shall and have where the meeting shall be held. And he came up with this. This is awesome. Just, I want to make it really, really clear. The meeting shall be held, not maybe.
Well, but that's not.
We're going to meet.
That's not a maybe in that context, and there's actually, fascinatingly enough, a Supreme Court case on this, that the word may isn't always discretionary, so what this is saying is that may modifies the request. It's saying that the trustee may request it. Once the request is made, you have to read the rest of the clause, which is it'll be done at the next possible meeting. And I know that's confusing, and when I read that case, it was confusing, but that's what that may is. If you want to change it, then we can reword it something along the lines of a request from the trustee regarding the offer of employment shall be heard at the next possible meeting. But this says that already. We could reword it that way, but that's what this says. That may is modifying the trustee's ability to make the request.
A trustee may request is what this is saying. The trustee may request,
Yep.
not the president may or may not put it on the agenda.
Exactly.
Right, the
So
trustee
once the
may
trustee uses his or her discretion to make the request, it's going on the agenda. That's the way that reads right now.
Okay. But
But I can reword it if the board is up.
okay. I think the intention, I think we all agree on the intention, for sure, that it's the next possible meeting that's the case. And looking at the may from that standpoint, I think makes sense. The trustee may request it, but I think the intention is certainly, I think we can all agree upon that. I think I'm seeing some nods. I think we're getting close. Trustee Calvert?
I think I just need some clarity on the fact of two trustees, and if they're disagreeing about someone, what kind of conversation is going on between the two trustees that they feel that this happens? I'm struggling with that.
Please, go ahead. No. I was just going to make sure, so I'm clarifying, you're saying, so
you and I decide that we do not want Ellen to be on the leadership team. So how do I come to you and say, you know what, I don't want her on the leadership team? I guess that's my...
It should be based upon that criteria, and it should be based upon one of these things. Correct me if I'm wrong, counsel?
Yep.
It should be based upon either because of Ellen, let's say Susan, because we don't want to put Ellen in this, right? Because of Susan's character, right? Because of Susan's character or alleged misconduct. And then I would imagine, because me and you're talking, right, is us going to President Smith or whatever, right? That we know of something, we've learned of something that should be brought to the it could be detrimental to the district. I would think that it should be something based upon something in that area, because from a legal standpoint, then it really takes the subjectivity out of it. And I just don't like Susan's dress or whatever, right? So then it would be making a request to the president, saying, hey, we'd like this to be on the agenda. And I think it should go to the superintendent as well.
It says that right here,
Yeah, it goes to
superintendent.
Okay, that's next. Okay, yeah. Yeah, for that. So it would have to be, you and Diane got together and found something out or learned of something, or someone shared something from the community. And
So that's what I'm struggling with, is that conversation how would well, so I know something about Ellen, and I'm gonna go over here and tell Diane
Let's
that,
try Ellen.
hey, Ellen has done something really, really bad.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that conversation come about? That I decide that I don't want Ellen on the board?
I followed you because you said leadership team earlier. I followed you. I think the conversation, if you decide that you would like to, and according to this, you don't have to go to Diane, by the way. You can go directly to the board president, right, and say, hey, I know that the alleged misconduct, such as along the line that Trustee Church was talking about, maybe it was 20 years ago, but I'm still uncomfortable with this person working with kids or whatever, right? Like that, something that, maybe with his law enforcement background, he knows something, right? And he said, hey, then he would bring that forward, and then it becomes an agenda item. And it doesn't take 2 trustees, so you don't have to go. Yeah, not based upon this conversation, it doesn't sound like we're interested in changing that piece. Based upon that, so I saw you, Trustee Manetto, and then Trustee Church.
Oh,
Okay, we'll come back to Trustee Manetto, Trustee Church.
I was going to make a motion.
All right, go ahead, sir, and then if she comes back to you, we can have that in discussion. Do we have public comment?
There's no public comment.
Okay. Okay, please go ahead, sir.
I make a motion that the listed policy be amended to include the statement as provided by the general counsel for item 8B.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor that board policy 4110 be amended, that section 8B be amended as stated. Right? Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, a second. Motion made by Trustee Church, seconded by Trustee Smith. Discussion. Did you come up with what you were going to?
yes.
Please.
Thank you, Madam President. It's probably a crazy thought, but if you were to go to the superintendent and say, these are the things I see, and she says, oh, not a good choice, let's not go there. It doesn't go to agenda then, right?
I wouldn't think it would need to, because then if it was something egregious or something like that, then the superintendent would be like, oh, I had no idea, we hadn't discovered that yet, or whatever.
Right, okay.
And then there's no reason, well, that offer's off the table, so there'd be no reason, I would think, to bring it to. Yeah, no, that makes sense, and that's why that superintendent step is really important, because then that would resolve that. And we haven't put someone out front in the public like that, and, which, again, we're talking about people.
And it's in consultation with the board president.
Please.
Yeah.
We haven't voted yet, just so you
Right.
know. There is a motion on the floor, we haven't voted.
Right,
Forgotten.
and that, my question's about the motion, I just want to clarify, is the motion only to amend B, or is it to amend it as written and then forward it on, and so that we move to the next agenda item?
I have a few more comments.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so you just want to do B. I just
Yes.
want to make
Yeah,
sure. we
and
heard-
I think you stated B1 when you said that, in that motion you just made, yeah. Yep,
Okay.
yeah, so we do want to go thing by thing, so, clear?
Clear, I just
Yep,
want to make sure.
all
I
right,
understand.
nope, yep, he said 8B1.
Yep.
It's really 8BI, but, yep, 8B, it's 8B.
8B.
It's just 8B. Okay, everyone clear, we're voting on the changes as listed to 8B, nothing more. Okay, all those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye?
Opposition? All right, the motion carries. Let the record show it is unanimous. Trustee Church, you said you had a couple other questions or comments?
Thank you very much. And hopefully these will be much quicker. Let me find my
Conversation.
notes, take off my glasses. I was thinking of, I'll give you all three at once, 3 different comments on here. And again, this is not a how-to recruit, this is a general framework. So one comment I came up with was the Department of Human Resources shall work with communications to ensure that the community is informed of job openings.
Oh, I'm sorry, where are you, Trustee Church?
I really don't have a place to put it yet, so
This is a suggested addition.
addition.
Okay,
And my point is that communications, in my recruiting experience, human resources has a job opening, but communications is essential to get the information out. So just once again, I'm just suggesting one simple sentence. The Department of Human Resources shall work with communications to ensure that the community is informed of job openings. So just a general guidance, could put it anywhere you want. And let me read 2 more if I might, so we can discuss it maybe all at once. The Human Resources Department may adopt strategies consistent with law and policy to be innovative in attracting employees. In other words, it's just general guidance that they can have a strategy, for lack of a better word. And then the third one is the department may adopt strategies consistent with law and policy to retain qualified employees. Because it doesn't do us any good if we hire them and then they quit within a year. So retention is generally considered part of talent acquisition. So those are my three things, and I think that's all. I might have one more down the road, but those are my three. Yeah, I have something else later, but those are. I just want to put those on the table.
Okay. If we look, I want to look a little bit then, because again, this is, as you said, this is overall, right? And if you look at 3C, that's where the Office for Communications, and that's where their step is, the posting and advertising.
3C.
Just 3C.
I don't see communications in there.
I think, and please, I don't mean to speak for you, Dr. Taylor, but I think this particular section is focused on providing human resources guidance regarding all of the steps that would be involved in talent acquisition, and then something specific like utilizing communications or, other types of media, that sort of thing would be included in administrative regulation or in department, work instructions. And then as it relates to the other, and I'm sorry I didn't get both sentences completely, but it sounded like the general meaning of those sentences was really affording direction to formulate a strategy, which I think is what the purpose of this board policy does. When we say the Washoe County School District shall develop and execute recruitment and selection strategies that ensure an adequate pipeline of appropriately skilled, qualified, et cetera. So I think the overarching goal of this policy is to have a solid talent acquisition strategy.
How about retention? Do you think that should be in there? And I'm open. I'm just, again, this is for discussion. I'm not falling on my sword on these, but what about retention?
I do think retention is, of course, an important part of an overall workforce strategy, but I think the goal of this particular policy was really focused on the front end of the process and talent acquisition. And so I think any sort of focus on retention might be appropriate in other areas.
I would, if I may, just in my work, talent acquisition and retention are separated. Because much like we've talked about and you've mentioned before, talent acquisition is so critically important in and of itself, but you certainly don't want to leave them out the back door. But that's different. Those are different efforts. Those are different initiatives. Really, it's more so talent acquisition kind of being pulled out to be specific, which has not always been the case in the past. So it's almost like that piece, and the retention piece continues as I see them as different functions.
And the operationally, they're different teams as well, right? So you really have talent acquisition strategy, and the work that they're doing is much different than an overarching retention strategy, which involves, everyone in departments like human resources, but also frontline managers and people along the way.
Any other comments on those two suggestions from Trustee Church? Looks like we talked about, I think you're reading number 4 when you talked about recruitment and selection strategy should account for and vary employee types. You mentioned, is that the part you read earlier?
I forget where, but yeah, I threw it to the wall. Nothing struck, so I'm willing to move on. I have one other issue.
You're right. Are we going?
I don't see any lights on, so.
Okay, so can we move on then to whatever's next? Okay.
So we get down to 2. This is the legal part. The districts shall not discriminate against any individual with respect to I kind of highlighted against individuals 40 years of age or older. That includes me. It almost rubs against the grain that implies that we can discriminate against under 40. I mean, do we even want to just leave that one part out?
I'll let Neil comment as well if he'd like, but this is a pretty standard statement that comes out of federal and state law. And so individuals over the age of 40 are identified as a protected class, and I think that's why they're included in the delineation here.
Anything different on that, council? Light on.
Bingo.
Light on for one word. I was going to say that same thing. These are all protected classes.
Yeah, I understand. It's just, I don't want to discriminate against anybody, whether it's required or not. And then disability, we don't discriminate against disability, but again, it's a legal question. They have to be able to lift 40 pounds or carry a gun or whatever it is for that particular job skill. How does that work into the term that we don't discriminate based on disability?
So an employee needs to be able to perform the essential functions of the position with or without accommodation. And so obviously we would be matching the person's abilities to the type of position that they were in and using that as qualifications.
And Emily, correct me if I'm wrong, those are typically listed within the job posting and the job description as well, as far as what the requirements would be, such as lifting a particular amount.
Absolutely. Any physical or intellectual qualifications for the position would be listed.
And as I understand it, this changes so often that it's so hard to keep up on. I sympathize for what you have to deal with. Am I correct? They get a contingent offer of employment, then we ask, can you lift the 40 pounds or if they meet the criteria?
So we have a lot of different job types in this district, and there's a number of different points at which that information might be disclosed during the application process, and then of course as individual positions are considered. And then an employee's circumstances may change during the course of employment as well, and there's always the Americans with Disabilities Act as amended process that employees can utilize in order to research accommodations.
My final question. Lawful use of any product when not at work. Can you discuss that?
I might have to defer to counsel to say what case this comes out of, but I believe this is intended to address some of the changes that have happened in recent years with respect to cannabis and marijuana, but I don't know that for sure.
Yep.
Bingo and yep. Let's make sure you get that in the minutes, if you would. Bingo and yep. But yeah. Because it's legal, but we still don't want it at work.
So the marijuana part, to the best of my knowledge, is still federally illegal, but state legal, even though the feds don't really enforce it. How does that play in?
Well, it doesn't, because you can't. If you said we can't use it at work anyway, so.
And the distinction here is not discriminating against someone for what they do when they're not at work. So in this situation, this is saying if someone is lawfully using a product when not at work, we wouldn't discriminate against them.
Just to be 100% clear, they can't be shooting heroin and doing methamphetamine, which are 100% illegal.
I'm not aware of a lawful way to do those things.
I appreciate everybody's time on these important issues. Thanks.
All right. Is there anything else on this particular item? We already looked. There's no public comment. If not, look. Oh yes, please, Trustee Calvert.
I just wanted to ask a question on the disability thing. Isn't it possible that when someone does have a disability, that employer can, I don't know if that's the word, they can make accommodations for that individual for certain types of whatever it is that they may need?
Yeah, so the Americans with Disabilities Act as amended has a process through which we would engage with the employee. It's called the interactive process. And so really you're looking to evaluate the relationship between the employee's disability and the essential functions of their position, and whenever possible, putting in place reasonable accommodations that would allow the employee to continue working. I always give an example. It's a nice, clean, bright line example. If a bus driver becomes vision impaired to the extent that that they can no longer see, there's no reasonable accommodation for that, right? Expecting the district to purchase an autonomous bus would not be reasonable under the standard. I don't even know if that exists, but so it's really that interactive process is intended to weigh the relationship between those things, and really is intended to promote an employer providing accommodations whenever possible.
That answer that for you, Trustee Calvert? Okay, Trustee Church?
Yeah, I do. I want to hear legal's response, because he's used bingo and yup. So just so I don't catch a lot of flack, gender identity or expression. So if an individual, say they admit they were born a male, they now identify as female, and they're applying to be a female coach, which puts them in close contact with other females, legally, under the law, we cannot discriminate, correct?
Yes. Legally, we cannot discriminate.
Okay. Other questions? Anyone? Okay. If not, looking for a motion, if it's the pleasure of the board, to approve agenda item 4110 as amended.
I just want to ask really quick, public comments closed on this item, right?
We took it already.
That's what I thought.
Okay. Thank you. Did I hear a motion? I did. Yeah, I thought I had. Okay. Thank you, Vice President Manello. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by motion made by Vice President Manello, seconded by Trustee Calvert. Any further discussion? All right. Seeing none. All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposition? All right. The motion carries. Let the record show it is unanimous. All right. We're continuing on, and you aren't off the hook quite yet, Ms. Ellison. This is your day. Agenda item 2.05, discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and or forward the proposed revisions of Board Policy 4117. This is licensed employee probation and evaluation, specifically to update formatting, clarify language, and reflect current practice to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval. And again, this is for action. We have Ms. Ellison before us.
You're right. I'll be here all afternoon. So Board Policy 4117 is related to licensed employee probation and evaluation. And a great deal of this information is also outlined in statute in greater detail. In the first section, you'll see some changes to the purpose statement. These changes don't materially impact the meaning, but are intended to provide greater clarity in our commitment to an objective process and its role in a human capital workforce strategy. Under the policy, we are still governed by NRS 391, but from a convention perspective, it's spelled out here in this section with NRS in the parentheses, and then you'll see references to NRS moving forward. That's the change that you see in Section 2, NRS Chapter 391. Again, a minor change, just deleting the reference to trustees in Section 2B. In the next section, Section C, again, the meaning is not materially changed, but we reworded it to remove the reference to the 2014-15 school year when this change was implemented. And then, of course, we updated the naming convention for ratings. So the last time this policy was updated, the ratings were highly effective, effective, minimally effective, and ineffective. And that minimally effective has since changed to developing. In Section D, you'll see that we eliminated this language from this policy, and really there were two reasons. One, we feel like at the policy level, this is a little bit too specific, but more importantly, this language can be problematic in creating an obligation for employees who statutorily need to be non-renewed. So, for example, if an employee is is less than effective a certain number of years in a row, then there's a statutory requirement that they be non-renewed. However, this kind of broad statement here regarding professional learning implies that there's sort of an entitlement to continued professional learning separate and distinct from our statutory requirements regarding performance evaluation. So we really think that it's not appropriate to be in this policy. And in general, our philosophical approach to professional learning and performance development for employees is outlined in Board Policy 4600. So our recommendation is to remove it from here. Under the desired outcomes and the other sections that you see removed from this policy, they were deleted in order to be consistent with the adopted formatting for board policies moving forward. And that's all I have for this one.
Okay. All right. Questions, comments? Excuse me. Questions, comments on this one before us? Just as we're looking, I don't see any lights right now. Let's take, if we have any public comment on this one?
Don't have any public comment.
Okay, thank you. To the board, questions, comments from Ms. Ellison on it? If not, if it's pretty clear, then I'm looking for a motion, if that's the pleasure of the board.
I'll make a motion. I move that Board Policy Committee forwards the proposed revision of Board Policy 4117, licensed employee probation and evaluation, to a future meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval.
Thank you, Trustee Smith. Is there a second? Seconded by Trustee Rodriguez. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Aye. Opposition? All right, the motion carries. Let the record show it is unanimous. We're going to go on to 2.06, excuse me. Discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and/or forward the proposed revisions of Board Policy 4125, employee records, specifically changes to conform to adopted board policy format and language convention, to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval. And once again, Ms. Ellison, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Board Policy 4125 outlines the district's approach to employee records and information. And in the purpose statement, you can see the first change is an immaterial edit that provides more direct language and clarity. Under the definitions, we've added a definition section and moved the definition of employee up from the policy text where it previously was. We've deleted governing principles consistent with the adopted format. And in section 1B, we've recommended the deletion because it's redundant to section 1 and overly specific for policy. You'll see they become renumbered once the changes are made. Governing practices were eliminated per the adopted format. And then you'll see many, many changes in the pages below, and I'll just kind of summarize the recommendation from council, and I agreed because of the level at which we should be at when we're talking about policy, was to take all of the subsections that were previously titled, employee information, public records, confidential records, and collapse those into the new section 4, which says the superintendent shall develop administrative regulations and administrative procedures necessary to implement this board policy, which must include, and then outlines each of the things that were listed there previously. And from a readability perspective, a lot of the information that was contained in those previous subsections is more appropriate for administrative regulations.
Absolutely.
Then we go on down to, I think, the former L. So you'll see again, as in the first policy that we reviewed, that section L is struck, and that's because it's redundant to Board Policy 9070, Section 2, which already gives the superintendent this authority. And then the changes made from desired outcomes through the end of the policy are again conforming changes in order to be consistent with the adopted language and formatting convention.
Okay. I think that pretty much clears it up. I mean, part of what we'll see is a lot of, just really a continuation of work that began before COVID, frankly, of lining up a consistent format for all of the board policies going forward. So we'll see that as we go through this next couple of years for all of us. So, looking for questions, comments from anyone? Yes, Dr. Nicolette.
Thank you. I do have a point of clarification.
desired outcomes, we are removing those from all or most board policies, and what would be the reason?
The desired outcomes were removed by the policy template and with the previous board under board policy 9070 or 9100. I can't, it's one of those two. Anyway, it doesn't make sense. Why do you have desired outcomes in a purpose statement? The purpose of a policy is, here's our purpose statement, here's how we expect you to carry it out, superintendent. And then the superintendent drafts regs. The desired outcomes are modifying a policy which already has a purpose statement, and you're creating obligations that you don't want to create. I've been troubled by the desire. I've been here 6 years now. I've been troubled by the desired outcomes since I got here because it doesn't make sense. It's inconsistent. I've never seen that in the law, and these are our laws. And so this, I just as a side note, I love the refresh on this policy. It's well done. It's to the point, and that's how policies should be. They're not books. You're telling the superintendent what to do, and then it's our job as her employees to make sure it gets done. So this is a really nice rewrite. Compliments to Emily and Chris. I know helped you a lot. But that's why. So desired outcomes don't exist by board policy. If you want to put them back in, you'd have to change the other board policy.
Does that answer the question as to what happened? And
Absolutely, thank you. I just want to, think about why they're gone, and I absolutely agree that it creates an obligation, and I absolutely agree. I think most of you know how I feel about board policies. If it's more than 2 pages, we probably got into areas we shouldn't be. So thank you.
yes, thank you, Clerk Nicolette. You have certainly said that, and it's said once again now on the record. Thank you. But one of the things you'll see as part of the effort, really, too, and just over time. I mean, I've been on the board 7.5 years. I think just over time, more of the why has gotten into this. Remember, our policies, this is the what. We are the what. We're not the how. We're not even the why, right? Other than our purpose statement at the beginning. But mostly, we're not the how. And it's really cleaning out some of that so that we aren't getting too into the day-to-day, because we aren't the educational professionals in terms of K-12. Okay, at least most of us. Some of us have, Miss Ellen, some of us have a little K-12 experience behind them, but the vast majority of us don't. So it's really part of it is cleaning up some of that as well. Okay, good question though. Otherwise, it's like, why'd your desired outcomes go away? So very good. Okay, any other questions, comments? Seeing none, if it's the pleasure of the board, looking for a motion for approval of board policy 4125.
So moved.
Okay, is motion on the floor. Is there a second? Okay. I'm sorry? We already did public comment. No, you stay out of our weeds. You stay out of our weeds. You stay out of our... No, I'm kidding. No, I will forget. So I've been reminded by board members for various things, so thank you, though. I just have to get that back at you, though. All right. Okay, there is a motion on the floor by Clerk Nicolette, and I think it was seconded by Vice President Manetto. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Aye. Opposition? The motion carries. Let the record show it is unanimous, and we will just keep it going. We will keep it going on to 2.07. Discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and or forward the proposed revisions of Board Policy 4160, mandatory self-reporting by employees pertaining to arrest, charge, or conviction of a crime, specifically changes to conform to adopted board policy format, back to the formatting we've been talking about, and language convention to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval. Ms. Ellison, back to you.
All right, so you'll notice a change up at the top, transitioning this policy from the Office of General Counsel to the Office of Human Resources, in addition to the Office of Labor Relations, moving to the Office of Human Resources effective in July. Policies of this nature, most of the 4,000 series, really are the responsibility of the Human Resources Office in terms of enforcement and follow-up. So it makes sense to transition that policy to my office. The changes in the title are just for readability, minor, again, immaterial changes. And then within the purpose statement, you'll find some editorializing, really just to remove kind of superfluous language and provide additional clarity. The removal of governing principles, again, is a conforming change. And under section 1, again, the edits are for clarity and simplicity without having a material impact on content or meaning. Same through section 2. Again, the words convey the same meaning, just in simpler, plainer language. And then the desired outcomes and changes through the end of the policy are conforming in nature.
That sounds pretty clear, Trudy, but let's see if there are any public comment on this one.
John Ippolito.
Mr. Ippolito, welcome, sir. Wait, with mic's on. Okay.
Thank you. Hi, I'm John Ippolito. I don't know, my comment, I'm with Protect Nevada Children, by the way. You can find us on Facebook at Protect Nevada Children. I think the attorney might have answered it in the last one, the desired outcomes. It sounds like you've gotten rid of those across the board. I initially, when I saw the title of this agenda item, I thought it was because of this Washoe County School District counselor who got arrested on child pornography charges. Is that why you're changing this? It doesn't seem like it, but I am a little curious. From what I just heard, that doesn't sound like it at all. But that would be a question I'd have if you answer it.
Thank you, Mr. Ippolito. Do we have any other public comment?
That's all.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Trustee Church?
Thank you. This is one, as a background investigator, I've dealt with many times. They deny being arrested. It turns out, say, shoplifting, they got a misdemeanor citation, which is an arrest. And then they deny it, and we find it in their background, and they claim, oh, I wasn't arrested, I was cited. So I think we need to clarify that. A citation is an arrest.
What's your recommendation?
That we...
Is it, the place and not a...
That's a good question.
Kind of
You asked me
overall.
the tough questions.
Well, it's your idea.
I've got the easy idea. I look to legal to help me out on this, but...
I think it's in there. I agree with you. I see your point, but it does say self-report any arrest, charge, or conviction. A citation is a charge, as you pointed out.
So let's make it real clear and just add the word citation.
So any arrest, charge, citation, or conviction?
Because you do clarify later on that it does not apply to traffic.
I was just going to say, because citation makes me think about somebody running a red light.
I'm fine, since they don't issue citations that I know of ever for felony, misdemeanor citation. But it does say under Section 3, any misdemeanor except for minor traffic citations.
Okay. Thank you, Trustee Church. Trustee Rodriguez?
Kind of piggyback on that a little bit. Any misdemeanors, I think domestic violence, i.e. domestic violence, driver under influence, or battery. Battery could be something you can get depending on what department it is, you can be a citation for that. And I'm also not seeing anything in here about like a time frame, like 72 hours of incident or 3 business days. I'm not seeing anything as far as like when do you need to report it. I'm missing that.
Okay, let's do a couple of things. So you're suggesting that we give examples of misdemeanors?
Yeah, because if you see any misdemeanor except for traffic, traffic citations, just give more broad, like domestic violence or battery, along with the DUI, and then something about a time frame, like you have 72 hours from being released of custody, or 72 hours from, well, even in jail and park, you can make all the phone calls you want, but a time frame, establish a time frame when you shall or will report to the district.
So I'll say to you, as I said to Trustee Church, recommendation on when the time frame where it might fit on here.
I would say under reporting, maybe bullet number 3 or number 4, like you have 72 hours or 3 business days or something to report an incident to the district.
Okay, what might you have a
I would just point out again, trying to keep these broad base, that's all in the superintendent's regs. So the board in subsection 2 is telling the superintendent to develop administrative regulations and procedures to implement this policy. And in this particular instance, you're saying to her, they must include the following: identification of the individual to whom a self-report of an arrest, charge, or conviction must be made. So, i.e., if you work for Emily, you must tell Emily. The time period after the arrest. So I think that addresses yours. So you're telling her that she has to say in reg 2 days or 3 days or whatever. And the process for notification to the NDE, because if it's a teacher or licensed professional, right? So I think you're already addressing that, is my point. With regard to driving under the influence, it's any misdemeanor except for minor traffic citations. And then you guys, the board is walking it back and saying minor traffic. We want to be clear, DUI is not minor. So that's why that example is in there. So I think it's pretty clear, domestics and batteries. But I agree with you. You know, again, though, if the superintendent should be listening to this, and she probably would put that in the reg instead. Just food for thought on that.
Oh, sorry. The only thing that I was going to add was, I don't remember exactly which situation it was in. I think it was when we had to make the changes in response to the sexual misconduct investigations 4 or 5 years ago. The providing examples to help people understand what we were actually asking when it came to criminal convictions actually ended up creating more confusion, because then people were trying to decide, well, was this really this or was it that, versus a broader statement of it's all misdemeanors and DUIs, not traffic.
Right. I mean,
Trustee
like,
Richards?
if you have like a 4th of July party and you got a noise complaint at your house, you got police interaction. I mean, you know, more often than not, you know, discretionary of the officers going, hey, can you turn it down? But if you do get a citation for that, I get that that's not what we're looking at, noise complaint 4th of July or New Year's party. So I hear what you're saying on that, causing more confusion. But I guess, you know, limit to violent crimes, you know, violent misdemeanor crimes, domestic violence, battery, or in this case, you know, DUI. So, you know, leaving out like the civil stuff. But kind of going back to the time frame, if there's something somewhere else where it says like, hey, you have 72 hours to report to the superintendent of a law enforcement interaction, then okay, cool.
I do think that time frame is important because, you know, 2 years from now, hey, 2 years ago, I certainly had this little domestic situation. Or, right, understandable. Trustee Church?
To handle this administratively real quick, I'd like to make a motion that we amend 1A, reporting, to insert the word citation after the word arrest and before the word charge.
Good.
Okay, there,
Is there discussion?
it won't be discussion unless there's a second.
And again, this is what this is what we discussed, that they say, oh, I got a citation for shoplifting. I didn't get arrest.
Yeah, I hear exactly what you're saying. It's only discussion if there's a second, because there's a motion on the floor. We got to have a second first.
I'll second.
You second? Okay,
Yeah.
now we're for discussion. Okay.
And just to clarify, so that, you know, poor HR is not getting 13 billion, you know, dog complaints or parking violations. Just kind of leave it to crimes involving property and people. So kind of leaving out the noise complaint stuff, weeding out the civil stuff. So keeping it to property, you know, like shoplifting, like Trustee Church is saying. I agree, you don't want teachers out there shoplifting. But keeping it to property and people.
But do we want to leave out civil stuff though?
Well, I guess, I mean, you know, if HR is getting someone, hey, you know, cops came because my kids were, you know, throwing rocks in the street, or, hey, the cops came because of a noise complaint, or my dog's barking. I mean, that's stuff that we really need to know, or HR needs to.
But that wouldn't fall under here, would it? That stuff doesn't fall under here.
Well, I guess if you get a citation for those things.
Oh. See, I think charge covers citation. I mean, you two are the law enforcement guys. You certainly have more expertise on it than I do. I think charge covers it. That's my concern about citation. Because if we say citation, then we're going to have to clarify that. And I'm not a law enforcement.
And that might be something where, you know, legal can help. Like, hey, yes, you got to disclose these citations if this involving, you know, crimes to property, crimes to people. You know, leaving out the noise complaint or the, parking on the red line, stuff like that, which, things like that.
Are there,
Is that something, is that kind of what you're going with, Trustee Church? Like,
Well, number one, again, as a background investigator, retired, I can't tell you how many times they didn't report a shoplifting or a battery, they got in a bar fight, which if they're violent, we need to know, because they said, oh, I got a citation. And so I could amend that to say misdemeanor or felony citation.
So
But-
those are not charges, Trustee Church?
Well,
No,
again-
I just don't know, help me understand, are those charges?
I'm putting myself in the place of the employee that goes, well, you didn't say that. I don't define charge that way, I'm the employee. That they will use that as a cover to not self-report.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, thank you. Trustee Nicolette, and then we'll go back to you, Trustee Rodriguez.
Thank you. I have the same question because I'm definitely out of my scope of expertise, citation, charge, and then I also want to firm up that the administrative regulations, I am certain is where it needs to be more specific. And having said that, what's the difference between, is there a difference between a citation and a charge?
What's the legal definition for, I mean, you two have working definitions, because you're still active, you're retired, but you've certainly been in it. But what's it say legally?
Yeah, I've done a little bit of this in the past, and
You're a DA. Yeah, you've done a little
a
bit.
citation is a charge. So a citation, actually, if you were to look at it, is literally a criminal complaint filed against you by a police officer. So when you get pulled over for speeding and he or she hands you your ticket, it'll say at the top, this is a criminal complaint. So it's actually, you are charged with that crime at that time. In Nevada, misdemeanors are, all misdemeanors, even traffic, are criminal in nature. So not all states are that way, but that's how we choose to do it. So that is, you are charged with that. That being said, I respect where Trustee Church is coming from. I do see how people can be confused by that. In my mind, it's more of a regulation thing, but a charge is a charge, and it doesn't matter if it comes through a citation or anything else. I would also point out that if you are charged with a crime, even if it is disturbing the peace, it doesn't mean that something's going to happen to you at your employment. It just means you have to tell us. So we drafted it as bigger, and then the employer, so let's say, again, using Emily as an example, it's her employee. Emily decides what to do with that. And maybe it's, hey, don't let this happen again, or maybe it's, whoa, we're going to have to do a complete investigation. It just depends. So self-reporting doesn't mean you're going to be terminated or anything else. So it's a broad net, and then you can boil it down.
I can also just offer commentary in practice, and this policy has been in place since 2012. The policy in general does accomplish what it's intended to accomplish, and so, we may have people who fail to disclose something to us, and then we have a cycle in which they have to be re-fingerprinted. If that's uncovered, more often than not, the claim is ignorance to the policy, not ignorance to their charge or conviction. So I don't know if that helps clarify the discussion, but it's more often than not, I didn't know I had to tell you, not I didn't know this warranted me telling you.
Well, you know what, how do we do in that, it seems like it hasn't been an issue, but to hear what Trustee Church is discussing in terms of, well, I didn't know this citation was a charge, one example. I'm a little concerned personally about saying, well, not crimes on people, because I think there's some domestic situations that I think would be important. And that I think I wouldn't want to say, well, that's not as important because you didn't, steal somebody's computer or whatever, right? And so I don't, that piece, I don't know where we land in it. Is there a possibility for a definition section? Right? And in there, it says that it defines a crime or a citation, or the citation piece of it is included in there somehow, so it doesn't leave it off if someone is making their determination because, well, I read the policy and I didn't know a citation was a charge, or whatever. Just something to think about. Trustee Smith and then Trustee Calvert.
Thank you, President Taylor. I do, in general, support the real-life examples that Trustee Church and Trustee Rodriguez are mentioning in terms of the policy is really meant to be comprehended by those reading it. And by including citation, we perhaps help close a hole there. But as a point of clarification, I believe that the word citation would need to be added in 1A and then also 1AI so that those two lines match each other. You'll see that arrest, charge, and conviction are there in the same with I, so I believe citation would need to be added in both those areas.
I'll amend
Thank you,
I will amend my motion to include both parts.
Okay, to include 1A and then 1AI?
Yes, with the
Okay,
word citation.
you're the second. You approve of that, friendly, you're okay with that, friendly?
I do, but if you could also add in there, since it's your motion, a time frame when an employee should report it to the district.
It is in the superintendent looked
It's in
up,
the
it's in
reg?
the,
Oh, so
it is.
so it is written somewhere?
And it's
Awesome.
actually, what is it,
Okay.
you see it up? I think it's even tighter than what you were saying.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
so admin reg 4160, 24 hours.
That's even tighter. See, look at, that's the cop in you, yes. Okay, so we do have an amended motion and the friendly was accepted, so thank you for that, trustee Church. Trustee Calvert?
I don't know if this has anything with the conversation, but background checks, they pretty much always say if a person, whether it's here in Nevada or in a different state, it's pretty comprehensive as to what, if they violated misdemeanor citations or whatever, those are pretty tight, right?
Absolutely. So not only do we have the background process on the front end of the application, which involves disclosures and then collecting core documentations related to those voluntary disclosures, employees go through a fingerprinting process that's an FBI fingerprint check, so that checks nationwide. And then because our school police facilitates the fingerprinting process, they're also able to run what we call wants and warrants through NCIC system. So it's the same system that active law enforcement use when they run your plates and pull you over. And so that actually provides that much more comprehensive of a picture based on any issues that may previously exist. And then we go through that process every 5 years with employees.
So what happens and you hire someone, and I've worked a little bit in human resources, and they'll be like, they have maybe a little something that they didn't report or whatever. How do you deal with that? Do you let them come clean about it, or do you have a discussion? How is that handled?
Yeah, so our Office of Labor Relations gets the, we call them the returns that come back on fingerprints, and then they contact the employee to make them aware that information has been uncovered, and then during the course of meeting with that employee, collect information about why it wasn't disclosed, the nature of the crime, what the situation was, and every situation really is looked at on a case-by-case basis in relation to the work that the employee is doing, the egregiousness of the situation, the time frame that has passed, that sort of thing.
Okay, so it sounds like what we're looking at, and I see your light, trustee Church, looks like we have the motion, which was now amended, friendly amendment was accepted, that the word citation would be included on 1A as well as on 1AI. If that motion passes and if the word citation is included here, then I really would just pull back on my recommendation that we add the definitions because citation's in there. So then it isn't unclear. It's absolutely clear on that. So, trustee Church?
Just one clarification. When somebody's issued a misdemeanor citation, they are not fingerprinted, which is why it's so important that they disclose it because it doesn't always show up right away in the fingerprint process. A lot of times some of the agencies are 1 year behind, and we find out from other sources about the citation, say for shoplifting. So that's one reason it's kind of important.
Well, I think the motion's out there, and there was a second to the motion, and there was an amendment. Do we have any public comment on this one?
No.
Okay, thank you very much. So if it's the pleasure of the board, then I'm going to go ahead and call for the question.
Before you do that, we might as well, I think we need to add it to 2.
Is there another area?
2.1, self-report of an arrest, citation. We
2I.
need to be consistent, right? Citation, charge, or conviction.
You see where that is, trustee Church? You're the motioner?
2 double I, right?
No,
And I.
2 single I and double, no,
Both.
just single I. Oh, no, 2 and double I.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, so I make a motion that.
No, you don't have to make a motion, just still a friendly on we haven't voted on the first motion yet, so So that first motion is still on the floor, so we can have a second motion because the first one's still there.
I'm sorry, do you want me to amend it?
Yeah, I'm just asking, are you good with the friendly amendment?
Yes, I'm good with it.
To include those same changes to 2I and 2II? Yes. That's easier than trying to do a whole new motion. You good as the seconder, Trustee Rodriguez? Okay, so then we have the amended motion 4 times. The word citation will be added as appropriate in line with arrest, charge, or conviction. 4 times as noted. That's the motion that's on the floor. Friendly amendments were accepted. Good catch, counsel. All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Aye. Opposition? Was that a yawn or was that a no? Oh, that was a yawn. Okay, I thought so. I wanted to be sure. All right. Thank you. The motion carries. That's what happens when you have law enforcement people on the board. All right. Thank you very much. And then we'll go right on to agenda item 2.08. 2.0. I think that made that stronger, though, and it makes it really clear. So, all right, discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and/or forward the proposed revisions to Board Policy 4214, drug-free workplace, specifically changes to conform to the adopted Board Policy format and language conviction, as we've been doing, to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration and preliminary approval once again. One more time, Ms. Ellison.
All right, last time. The majority of the changes that you will see reflected here are proposed in order to provide clarity and greater specificity. The changes to the title, the changes or the additions in sections 1 and 2 to clarify definitions. Moving down to section 3, district property and impaired were both moved up to the new definitions section at the top of the policy. And we are actually recommending the deletion of the definition for drug paraphernalia and for possess or possession because those terms aren't referenced in the policy. So while certainly related, we don't need to provide the definitions because they're not utilized. Then again, in section 6, we're providing some clarifying language with respect to the definition. And then we removed section 7, which was the definition of worksite, because there's also a definition of district property included above. So it is redundant. Same thing in section 1, that is redundant. Guiding principles or conforming change. And then within the, I think it's the new, well, it's hard to know how it's numbered now. I think it's the new section 1. Most of the language changes that you see are not intended to change meaning, but to simplify the language utilized. Let's see, more conforming changes throughout the policy, more simplification. And then when we get down to the old section F, I believe we are on now. Yep. A safe and productive, drug-free and alcohol-controlled substance-free workplace. We feel like that was just superfluous language to this policy. Section G being redundant to section 1 and who the policy applies to. We felt like the information included in section H would be, again, more relevant or appropriate in an administrative regulation. And then minor editorials throughout the rest of the policy. And then at the end, the changes that you see reflected in section E, the last section before desired outcomes. We're proposing, again, just simplifying language. This is really overarching to all policies and regulations, compliance with all state and federal laws and regulations pertaining to this specific area. So alcohol and controlled substance-free workplace. Then again, deletion of desired outcomes and updates through the remainder of the policy to conform with changes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Counsel, your light's on. You wanted to? That was an accident? Okay, it's okay. Okay, well, board members are kind of gathering. Do we have any public comment on this one?
John
We
Eppolito.
do, okay. Mr. Eppolito? Welcome back.
John Ippolito. On item 3, it seems to me that it's no longer a problem if a kid brings drug paraphernalia to school. So evidently, they could bring a glass pipe or a hypodermic needle or whatever to use with drugs. You can't bring the drugs, I'm not saying that. But it used to be, the way I'm reading this, it used to not be okay to bring drug paraphernalia to school. But with this revision, since paragraph 3 was crossed off, it seems like it is okay now. Maybe you could address that.
Trustee Church?
I would ask that be addressed.
Okay, I'll say a couple things. First of all, this is about the workplace.
Right.
So let's just start with that. This is about the workplace. So this is for employees. And then the definitions were removed because that language was not used in the policy.
Right, and so the language that was deleted was just definition language.
It's just definition.
Not directive language.
Exactly. Okay, which you said earlier.
So
Okay.
to be clear, this does not permit a student to bring drug paraphernalia to school.
Okay. Other questions? Trustee Church?
Thank you. I do have a few concerns, and I did my homework this weekend, but I wish I'd done more. Let me pull up my notes. The policies that I've looked at, this is lacking in a number of ways. Number one, reporting by staff. A lot of the policies I've seen have some provision in there about reporting if you believe in another employee is under the influence. Also, and this is the biggest one, is the policies I've seen, and maybe it's in a regulation, maybe this is micromanaging, but I don't think so. This is in most of the policies I've seen. We care deeply about our employees, our workforce. We recognize that drug addiction is more of an illness than a criminal thing, and we want them to have the best treatment. We don't want to throw people away because they were because of an addiction problem. We want to retain people, and so I'm really shocked that we don't have a statement, or most policies are very in-depth about what happens if they self-report or if they're reported and come to our attention that there may be a addiction problem. Oh, my time's up. So anyway, yeah, I really think that should be in there. I'd like to hear from staff why it's not.
I don't know that there's, just based upon since I've been on the board, I don't know that there may be a reason why not, unless it's someplace else, or maybe it's just something that's just never been a part of it. Anybody know the history on that at all? No, it doesn't look like it. Do we know if it's addressed anywhere else?
I mean, well, even
Okay.
not in the policy, so let me ask you a question. An employee comes to you, and I'm sure it must have happened, I got a drug problem. What do we, they've got self-insurance. We normally have some EAP, I think is what we used to call it at the city of Reno.
Yeah, it's still
So
EAP.
what do we have?
Most people have EAP. I mean, we have EAP, and most organizations still call it EAP. That's the Employee Assistance Program, by the way. But that might be something, Ms. Ellison, as Trustee Church asked, if an employee says, hey, I have a drug problem.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of including in a policy, I think the district's response to that would be more appropriate in administrative regulation or in procedure. But of course, we do have resources in place, including an employee assistance program. More often than not, what my experience has been is not necessarily that an employee raises their hand and says that they have an issue, but the supervisor realizes that there may be a concern and approaches the employee about it, and that's the point at which it's uncovered. It is not uncommon for us to engage in what we call a fit for duty evaluation, and so that could address a myriad of concerns, including addiction, and then it's at that point that an employee may be able to pursue opportunities for assistance.
Thanks, Ms. Ellison. Counsel?
Yeah, and everything Emily said is exactly how we handle it, but I don't think that's what this policy is addressing. If you look at the purpose statement, this policy is addressing that we don't want alcohol and controlled substances on our campuses, at our locations, and in our school environments. And that's what this is addressing. This isn't addressing employees who may have these issues. That's a completely different, and it's probably not even policy, but it would be the ADA, frankly. It's recognized as an ADA issue, and so that's my recollection. I'm correct on that, right? Yeah. So this isn't where that would be addressed. You could possibly create your own policy related to that, but I think we already have business practices that solve these issues. This is about you can't bring drugs and alcohol onto school grounds and or while you're participating in district activities off site as well. So that's what this is dealing with. This isn't for folks who have a problem, so I think that's important to note.
Okay. I did get Superintendent. I was just going to go to you, Superintendent. Go ahead, please.
Well, thank you, President Taylor. I'm wondering, Emily, would it be covered under, and this is only because I just took and I did take the health screening, the assessment, Virgin Pulse, right? And so they do ask questions regarding, I know I did, didn't do it, and I took a picture of it too. But they do ask questions such as that. But I'm wondering, would this be covered more under a wellness policy that we could take a look at?
Yeah, I think that's appropriate, and I believe we do have a wellness policy. I'm sure it's up for renewal. It seems like all of mine are in the hopper, so that is probably a good place to think about, workforce, mental, and physical health.
It sounds to me, if I may, and Trustee Church, correct me if I'm not getting to the crux of what you were saying. It sounds like then, one, this isn't quite necessarily, this isn't necessarily where it goes, but I don't think anybody would say it isn't important. And so either report back, in my mind, then a report back, whether maybe even in the superintendent's highlights, yes, this was covered here in the wellness policy or whatever, or this policy number, yada, yada, which we know is going to be coming up, or something like that, so that then we know if there is a gap, right, the gap can be addressed if that's the pleasure of the board. And then if it isn't a gap, then we know there is something there, and then that takes care of that concern. So, Trustee Church, does that kind of circle that for you? Because we don't know if we have that or not, so let's find out if we do first.
My gut says this should be sent back and brought back for research, because number one, I think it should be in there, even if it's a sentence that says, we shall develop rules, regulations, or policies on drug treatment if we don't have one. That should be in there. Number two, I haven't even talked about yet, and that's testing. So a supervisor thinks a bus driver may or may not be tipsy. Again, I've read I've read a number of policies. I wish I'd read more. A lot of them go into such great detail. I don't want that. I don't care if it's a spectrometer, what the blood, level has to be, or if the guy has a union right for a rep. I don't care about that in a policy, but I think we need something in there about testing, because I don't see it anywhere in there. And we need some direction to staff at the policy level that testing will occur as whatever. It may be a sentence, it may be a paragraph, but I think testing should be in there, and I think at least a comment about treatment. So personally, I think it ought to be kind of sent back and maybe looked at a little more.
What's your recommendation regarding testing?
Well, that's a good question. I've gone into great detail with the City of Reno policy, just as an example, and some of that is so in-depth that it's ridiculous. So I don't think that should be in a policy, but there should be something in the policy that directs the superintendent to establish a testing policy. Plus, it changes all the time, with technology and the type drugs that are out there, and what and how you can test. But we need to know that our supervisors, our managers, our admin staff are empowered to initiate testing.
Okay, comments?
To that point, now that you've explained it, Trustee Church, I think that is important, and it is a direction. It's not a procedure that would be in the policy. The other thing that I keep looking at this, and I thought it the first time around, was because the purpose mentions students, which, and yes, this is important, that anyone who is on our campus be safe and drug-free. Unless you really understand what the responsible office is, Office of Human Resources, you may in fact interpret this to be for students as well. And so I might suggest that you clarify that just a little bit, because this is not about students. And I know that, but I think that needs some clarification.
So your recommendation then?
Well, I think I would redo the purpose so that it would be health and well-being of anyone on our campuses. And just, of course, it's employees, it's anyone, a vendor that comes on campus. It's spelled out in here with volunteers and trustees and employees, but using that word student in the purpose, I think muddies it. So I'd get rid of the word student.
Okay. All right. Other comment, Trustee Rodriguez?
I do agree, safety, security of the students and, schools are very, very important. And I'm just kind of wondering the direction. Are we talking about, or like random drug testing and stuff like that? Is that something that I'm open to, but I do know that there could be a fiscal impact on that as well. Is that something that we would need to consider? And then obviously, I'm sure the unions will probably have.
Yeah, I think we need to be careful about this topic.
I was just about to ask about that.
This is off the agenda, but I will point out that subsections, and let me explain, it's off the agenda because we're not talking about labor rights and things of that nature here. We're talking about a drug-free workplace, and that's significantly different. Those type of things that you're suggesting would be needed to be negotiated with the associations, and I don't think it's appropriate to negotiate them up here at this time without the association sitting here. With regard to the concerns brought up by Trustee Church, I'll just point out that the administrative regulations and administrative procedures section of this policy specifically says that the superintendent shall adopt administrative regulations that address the driving of our vehicles and as a condition of employment and those type of things. So it's already, I think that's already in here, and it even talks about renting vehicles and school buses and things of that nature. So I don't know. I think if you start flying down below that policy level, you're going to get this to be not a policy and more of a reg. So you've directed the superintendent to put that in reg. If she doesn't put it in reg, then that would be something you would consider on her evaluation. Now's not the time to do that, right? You're directing her. You're the boss. You've said, I want this. If that isn't in there, then that would be on her.
Okay, and we direct her through the policy.
And my point is, the policy already says all of those things. It talks about driving vehicles and CDLs. It doesn't talk about drug tests, but I don't think we can talk about that up here. That's not what the purpose of this is. This is no drugs, no tobacco, no alcohol in the workplace.
Okay, thank you, Council. Go to the superintendent and then back to Trustee Church.
So the admin reg to Chief Counsel's point is 1332, and it actually does point out at this current time violations. So, for example, violation of alcoholic beverage and controlled substance matters will be referred to school police department for their investigation and appropriate action, which may include a breathalyzer. And then it also has a section in there, to your point, Trustee Church, earlier, on cessation and prevention, information concerning assistance for the cessation of tobacco use. So we if you modify an admin reg, you'd be able to add other areas in there. Tobacco use will be available through the district. Faculty and staff may contact the district's wellness coordinator. So it is in there as well.
Thank you, Superintendent. Trustee Church?
Yeah, I just respectfully disagree in the sense that I think that issues regarding testing, and Trustee Rodriguez brought up a great point, and I think this would be the place where it would be if we were directing, and this is a very touchy subject, but if we were to direct random testing, especially of our police officers. Remember, we have cops that work for the school district, approximately 35, that carry guns and drive vehicles. So we're not just talking teachers and, and everything, but the bus drivers. What's more important than having bus drivers that are not impaired? So, a general comment on testing, a general comment on treatment, and a general comment on the criminal reporting, which was just brought up. If the person, say, is believed to be, falling down drunk, not just human resources needs to know, the police department needs to know if they're driving a vehicle. It's a felony to endanger children. So I'm just not comfortable with the policy as is. I think it's too vague. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Church. Counsel?
The policy does address that if somebody shows up to work intoxicated, that they must allow a certain amount of time to pass before they leave district property. I believe that's section 3. Sorry, I'm looking up whether or not you can negotiate. I believe drug testing is you have to negotiate. I don't think we can just throw that in a policy and say that's the way it is. Yeah.
Reference could be made, and that, of course, we have so many different policies. Some employees are not even covered by, or contracts. Some employees are not even covered by contract.
Well, law enforcement is, though, to your example. I just think we should be careful about throwing something in here but that's up to the board. The board.
One of the other things that I would caution or just remind the trustees is that particular employees are subject to particular state and federal laws too, outside of CBA's and district policy. So, for example, our bus drivers are subjected to random drug screens because of Department of Transportation regulations. I don't remember the specific requirements for police, but there certainly are other things influencing the actions that we take with respect to drug and alcohol-free workplace that aren't encompassed in the policy because they exist in law.
Thank you, Ms. Ellison. Other comments? Questions? And what's the pleasure of the board? I'm uncomfortable with for a couple of reasons, actually. I'm uncomfortable with a testing conversation at this point. One is it isn't a part. I don't reading the purpose. Students or not students, Trustee Nicolette. Reading the purpose, I think, doesn't necessarily lend to that. I don't know that it goes here. 1, 2. It is something that certainly needs to be in conversation with the bargaining units. I think that's absolutely the case. And then thirdly, we did not say that we were going to be discussing that. From an open meeting law standpoint, we did not say we're going to be discussing testing. And I'd be concerned about that as well, from that standpoint. I think there are things in the policies, not to say that those things can't be looked into. We can't have a discussion about testing or whatever it is that we want to do. But I'd be leery at this moment for those reasons. That's just one trustee. Trustee Smith?
Thank you, Trustee Taylor. I was quiet because I was writing. Okay, so in the new section 6, which is the superintendent shall develop administrative regulations, so on and so forth. Okay, if you go down to the new B, which begins requirements for district employees must maintain.
I'm sorry, what page are you
on? Page 5 of the PDF.
Okay, because I can't find it. Okay, gotcha.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
So B, the new B, appears to have absorbed that secondary paragraph, which is communication of the controlled substance-free workplace policy to all employees, trustees, and volunteers, because Superintendent McNeil pointed out that there is an administrative policy in place for that, or procedures in place for that. So as a suggestion, what we could do is continue that, and of course this would be up to our legal team to say if this would be appropriate, but we could extend that single sentence to include the procedure in place when drug or alcohol use is suspected. Because that line, the communication of the alcohol and controlled substance-free workplace policy to all employees, trustees, and volunteers, to include the procedure in place when drug or alcohol use is suspected, because we already know that it exists. So this would be an opportunity to just add a clarifying sentence to it, which might address the fact that we want to point out that there is a procedure already in place for when this might be suspected. I'm not a lawyer, but I'll just present that as a suggestion.
Did everyone follow that? Did everyone follow where she is on that? Will you, one more time for council, and then he can put it on there so at least people can see it. You know.
Certainly. So the line would stay the way that it is, which ends in "and volunteers, comma, to include the procedure in place when drug or alcohol use is suspected." Because this is really just about the communication of the policy to all the employees. And we know that the procedure exists. So we would say to include the procedure in place when drug or alcohol use is suspected. So it just says that we would explicitly call out that there is a procedure in place. We're not going to define what that is here. We're just going to call out that we already have a procedure in place. It's just a suggestion for consideration.
Okay. Thank you, Trustee Smith. Trustee Church?
The clerk, Nicolette, had comments about the word student, and then there's some comments here. I think I've raised enough issues about treatment and testing, just general comments on here in criminal reporting. I'd like to send, I'm prepared to make a motion that we just send it back and come back another day, but because all these things are really good, and I think it's better to sleep on this stuff and think about it. But even the comments that were just made by Trustee Smith, I think we've covered enough that it's maybe better just to send it back and deal with it another day. But I'm not going to make a motion yet because I want to hear comments.
Okay. Trustee Rodriguez, thank you. Trustee Church?
Actually, I think I kind of agree with Trustee Church. And I guess I'm not a representative for Skull or Grizzly Chew or anything like that, but the tobacco policy seems, I guess, kind of looking at, the mechanics and I know cops and law enforcement, they love their chew.
Where are you looking?
Chewing tobacco, I guess in section 6, it was a 6B or...
What page? Start with the page and work us from there,
geez.
if you can.
I think it's 5, prohibited against use of tobacco products to include electronic delivery devices. And I'll be honest, I mean, I've seen, bus drivers, I know they got a stressful job. I'm not going to say when or where, but I've seen bus drivers, pulled off somewhere taking a break. I guess, does the tobacco policy, I understand that we don't want to be using tobacco or tobacco products in front of students.
Hang on just a sec. He's trying to follow us so we can be up on screen for those who are watching on YouTube. So would you help him? Looks like page 5.
I believe it's 5, the prohibited against
6A.
tobacco products. Yeah. 6A,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
All right. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but if we have people on YouTube, that we want them to be able to see where we are too. So.
I guess, I'm a big proponent, like we don't want students seeing, we don't encourage tobacco products or use in front of students, but, I think if you're a grown adult, and you want to, have a chew while you're going from here, A to B, or you're taking a break somewhere and it's your lunch break, can you not, take a break and have a cigarette or whatever it is they want to do?
So let me say what I think you're saying, because none of this necessarily means it goes back per se. You're advocating for a change in this, because sending it back doesn't make this change. So what you really want to do is advocate for a change in I guess it's the new A now, 6A.
Yeah.
Am I right? I don't want to put words in your mouth. I want to make sure
I believe that is.
Because sending it back doesn't
6A.
change that. It just sends it back.
Okay.
So part of it is you're advocating for a change to it in what manner? Can you be specific? Again, I'm asking, what do you recommend? I'm trying to get us out of the habit of saying, here's the problem. No, what do you suggest as a solution to the problem?
Well, it's, saying basically like is against the use of tobacco products to include the electronic device delivery, I'm assuming the e-cigs, for lack of better terms, on or within school property to include athletic fields, parking lots, as well as other district buildings and places of public use. So I guess when I see that, I'm assuming like if someone wanted to use tobacco, grown adult, obviously I'm against using it in front of students. I'm not talking about bus drivers smoking with, bus full of kids. But if they're to pull off somewhere and use that, I think that should be okay, if that makes sense.
Okay, so you're suggesting that this be deleted. I'm trying to get to whether you help me with what you're suggesting. Certainly I know that you're not
I'm
comfortable
all for
with it,
within
but
school property and all that. I mean, obviously, I don't want kids to be encouraged to use tobacco products. But if you're a grown adult and you're driving from A to B, or if you're a bus driver, or you're a school police officer, or you're a mechanic on your way to somewhere, and especially on a break, do they have a place where they can use their tobacco product? Or is it allowed?
okay, is that please, Ms. Ellison?
So within the framework of this language, if a school police officer, for example, is out on patrol and takes their lunch break, I read this to mean that they should not be doing that in our vehicle, very definitely, and they should not be doing that on our property. I think a literal interpretation would probably say it's problematic for them to be in uniform, hanging out in a parking lot, smoking. I kind of look to Neil a little bit for, that's the kind of thing that brings up concern. But really the goal of the policy is not on district property, not in district vehicles, not when you're acting in your official district capacity.
Is that what you'd like to change, Trustee Rodriguez? I'm just trying to hone in on what you're saying so we can know what we're,
Yeah. And I'm not trying to go back 50 years,
it doesn't matter.
people smoking in cars and stuff like that.
Your thoughts
But
are
I'm
your
just
thoughts.
saying,
So
I mean,
we're gonna start passing cigarettes out in buses. No, I'm kidding. I mean, I know that's not what you're saying.
No,
so
it's not,
I'm just
yeah.
trying to get to where it is at.
Well, I just want to ensure that employees have reasonable access to, I mean, I know even on state buildings, there's smoking areas, there still exist, I see them. I guess, is there something for staff to have their break or whatnot? I guess is where I'm getting at.
Well, anecdotally, I can say this doesn't get brought to us as a complaint or a concern, right? Like, I'm trying to engage in an activity and there's nowhere for me to do that. So I think people are probably, hopefully, using good judgment about when and where they're doing those things on their breaks or on their lunch.
Was there something you said you wanted from council?
No, I'm not trying to open up a huge can of worms, but obviously I did. But rookie mistake.
No, your concerns are your concerns. It's okay.
Yeah. No, I just
People's thoughts and concerns are different.
I know people still smoke and still use chewing tobacco today, even though it's 2021. So I know it's still happening, and I just, I see all this here. I just want to be sure, does that apply out in public? Police officers on lunch, bus drivers between routes, or whatever, things like that. So
I would think from the reading of this, and certainly Ms. Ellison jump in, that just in that example for itself, if the bus driver isn't on school property and isn't in school property, like isn't on the bus, right, or isn't on school property, they're on their break, they're in between routes. I see them sometimes park like in the McDonald's parking lot because they can have a cup of coffee and they have 10 minutes between their routes to go. I don't think that. Again, we don't want them firing up on the bus because then that still leaves the smoke there for the kids. But I don't get the impression that this prohibits that because it doesn't say at any time during your workday. But you shouldn't be in school property. Shouldn't be in your bus doing it. I mean, that's the way I read that. I don't know if that's official, but that's the way I read that. And it sounds like that's the intention.
Yeah, and we did spend a lot of time during the last revision. It wasn't tobacco, but it was a glass of wine, like at a conference, I think was when it came up. And so we spent a lot of time talking about that. And again, it was we spend a lot of time massaging the language to try and get to sort of a common sense place, right? If you are in a district building, in a district vehicle, acting in your official district capacity, just don't do it, right? But if you, are on a break and you've walked away from your bus, it's not meant to be overly punitive, if that makes sense.
And I think that was partially your concern, am I right, Trustee Rodriguez? Okay. And anything more on this particular issue? And this one right here on the six, the new A on there, I think you got to a place where, hey, you think that people still smoke, people still chew, right? That we're there not being unduly punished, so to speak, right? So I think you got to that place. Don't let me put words in your mouth. Okay, we still have some other conversation. There's no motion. You're still considering your motion, Trustee Church?
I'm ready to make a motion.
Okay.
I make a motion the board policy 4214 be sent back to staff for reevaluation based on the comments received today.
Okay, there is a motion on the floor that 4214 be sent back to staff. Is there a second? Okay, I think the motion dies for lack of a second, so let's keep working. Right, let's keep working. We've had a couple of comments just to kind of sort of recap where we are surrounding students and making it going to the purpose and making sure that it's clear that this is not pertaining to students, right, Dr. Nicolette? And I think we had a public commenter that mentioned something around that will make that more clear. We had a conversation additionally about not being overly restrictive or punitive. We do still have employees that smoke and that chew. And it isn't in practice certainly like that and isn't intended to do that. And I think we got to an okay place with that because there are employees too, right? Are there other, that's what I remember coming up that we discussed. Did I miss any other point in this? The testing conversation should come up in a different place, right? Should that be the desire of the board? Okay, remember that conversation as well. Okay, yes, Trustee Smith?
Chief General Counsel Rombardo read my mind because in my edits, I made a similar change to what he's now offering.
Where's that?
For B, he has it right where the cursor is. He clarified the controlled substance use is suspected. So.
Oh, yes, that's the other one.
That's exactly what I was going to.
He actually typed that while you were talking.
Yes, I was going to make that edit.
No, thank you. So that's a proposed edit in that. Is everyone really clear? Can you see it on the screen?
And just to clarify that, to talk it through to anybody that's watching, a suggestion like this, please feel free to change it, signals a couple things. One, it signals to everyone that we have a procedure in place, so don't be surprised, and that you will be communicated about what that procedure is. So it's not defining those things, it is signaling that you are absolutely going to know that we have a procedure and you will be told about it, which makes sure that everyone knows this will not be a surprise to you in the event that this comes to your attention. So anyways, I open that up to my colleagues for consideration, if that addresses some of the concerns that I've been hearing in our dialogue.
Would you, if I mean, that's, we can do, why don't you can make a motion regarding this if you'd like to, then we can talk about that piece of this policy. If that's, you may not be ready to, and that's okay. Like Trustee Church sometimes throws it out for talking and it's not quite ready, but that's okay. If you're ready, great. If not, we'll keep.
Is there more discussion on that? I guess I know that is.
Well, if you weren't further, then why don't you make the motion? We'll have a second.
I will do that because I do like this change. Again, it's my first policy meeting, so I'm learning as I go.
All of us are working through it. It's okay.
I move to amend item 6B to include the edits as shown by Chief General Counsel Neil Rombardo, which concludes the final sentence of that section.
Okay, I think everyone followed that. Is there a second? Okay, motion by Trustee Smith, seconded by Vice President Manetto. More discussion on this, and the intention she just walked through is to make it very clear that there is a process in place. It's an administrative regulation, and whatever that procedure and process is, which will be updated as appropriately, and so on, that will be implemented should there be a violation at that time. And and really, this is saying it's on the superintendent to communicate that. Whatever that is, it's up to the superintendent to communicate that. And as counsel said, that's part of our expectation to her, and as a board. We did. Seeing no further discussion on it. Okay, all those in favor of I'm sorry, oh, trustee Church, yes, sir.
The only reason I have it on is give me time to read.
That's okay, go ahead. Get your glasses on.
I had to put
Yeah, I
glasses on.
thought you read it already, but you didn't have your glasses on, so that's all right.
So I'm about done. Give me about 10 seconds.
Okay, take your time.
I do a quick comment then, if I may, then discussion. I think I like it because it basically says to the reader that there is some kind of a policy on fill in the blank, testing, treatment, whatever that procedure may be. So I think I like it. Thank you.
Thank you, trustee Church. No other discussion on it? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment as shown, please indicate so by saying aye. Aye. Opposition? All right, the motion carries. The record show that is unanimous. That was just on that change, now not on the entire policy. Any other thing else? Trustee Nicolette, would you like to make a motion around students, that piece?
I have a question
Okay.
about the clarity. I mean, I like the intent that we're trying to keep everyone, employees and students, anybody who comes on campus, safe. That should be the intention. That should be what we work for. What in this policy makes it very clear that this is not related to student drug use, etc.? Can't really find a reference like that, but I certainly could have missed it.
Okay, counsel?
Well, the third sentence of the purpose statement says an alcohol and controlled substance-free workplace program. Students aren't working. So by its very definition, workplace deals with employees.
Yeah, kinda. Let me see here.
Would it make you more comfortable if the reference to employees and students was just changed to everyone on our campuses?
It would, but I think that might miss the intent, but that's what was my original thought. Because once we throw that word students in there, I think it muddies it. And so I would like to see it reference to anybody on our campuses.
Okay, we
Anybody
have
in our
some,
buses, yeah.
okay, we'll go to council, then trustee Rodriguez and trustee Church.
Paragraph 1, well, first of all, as a side note, in drafting these, as part of a draftsmanship issue, we have always put students separate and first at the direction of the board in the past. And the board felt that was important, and that is part of our manual and drafting policies. And if you'll see, language is always going to be students, families, and then employees, because we're here for our students, then our families, and then our employees. And that's, the way we operate. However, that being said, in paragraph 1, this board policy applies to applicants for employment, district employees, trustees, and volunteers who are representing or conducting business for the district on district property or at district-sponsored events. I don't think we can get much clearer than that.
Where'd you read that? Where's that? It's
Paragraph 1, I've highlighted it.
Under
It's
purpose?
on the board. It's the
got it.
Here,
Under definitions, I got it.
Yeah, let me do this. I'll accept so you can read it more clearly. All changes. So again, this board policy applies to applicants for employment, district employees, trustees, and volunteers who are representing or conducting business for the district on district property and or at district-sponsored events.
That seems pretty clear that students aren't in it.
Yeah.
But I think clarity is important, so trustee Rodriguez and then trustee Church?
And so I do understand this is specifically for human resources, employment, things like that. So I get how students are not under that umbrella. But I'm also, so in my nightly reading, I'm working on getting into it, but like student codes of conduct, I'm sure in there covers like dress codes, things like that, and I'm sure it encompasses,
Yeah, that's not here,
firearms, narcotics use, things like that. So I'm assuming that's covered somewhere.
You mean for students?
Yes,
Yes, that's
Yes.
completely separate.
right.
5,000
Okay,
series.
yep, different series, okay. All right, good question. You're like, so if this isn't about students, where is it about? Gotcha, okay. Good question. Okay, trustee Church?
That's my question. So do we have a policy on drug use by students?
This is in the 5,000 series of board policy. Okay, that's where the student policies are. Okay, yes,
Thank you.
Dr. Nicolette?
And thank you for helping me think. If appropriate, I would like to add, and visitors. I get the employees, I get the students, number one job, and visitors. I can live with it then,
In subsection 1?
in the purpose.
Oh, in the purpose. Okay.
Oh, being of all employees
Actually,
and
they should be
students? Health and
flipped.
well-being of all employees and students? Employees, students, and volunteers, is that what you're saying?
No, employees, students, and
Oh,
visitors.
visitors, I'm sorry, I meant
It's
visitors.
okay.
Well, let's be consistent with the other one.
Students, employees, students, visitors, and employees? Is that what you're, is that what you're getting to, trustee Nicolette?
Exactly, I'm just waiting for general counsel to like give his, yeah, that can work. All right, thumbs up.
Okay, so is that a motion?
That is a motion. I can make it official if you want.
That is a motion, is official. Is there a
All
second?
right.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to make the change as above, adding visitors to the first line of the purpose, seconded by trustee Rodriguez. All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Aye. Opposition? All right, the motion carries. Let the record show it is unanimous. I think that's all of the issues that were floating out there on this. Please speak up now if there's something else that we wanted to cover in this. If not, I'll be looking for a motion to adopt this board policy 4214 as amended. Did you have something, counsel?
I did, just so that for trustee Church and trustee Rodriguez, board policy 5250 deals with students, and it's specifically entitled Alcohol, Tobacco, and Controlled Substances, Student Prevention and Intervention. So the 5,000 series is our students, the 4,000 is our employees. So hopefully that helps.
And remember, they're all coming around, so we'll have an opportunity to have a deep dive into that as well. Okay, once again, we've made amendments. I don't think there's anything else anyone has mentioned that we haven't gotten a chance to dive into, but that's what these meetings are for. Seeing no other concerns, I'm looking, if it's the pleasure of the board, looking for a motion to adopt board policy 4214 as amended.
So moved.
Motion by clerk Nicolette, is there a second? Seconded, I'll take the second by Vice President Minetto. We've had plenty of discussion. Your lights on, trustee Church?
I just want to go on record. I'm only going to oppose it because I think we need more definitive comments about testing, treatment, and criminal reporting, but I understand we've already discussed.
Okay, thank you, trustee Church. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Aye. Opposition?
Nay.
Okay, let the record show the motion carries 6-1. Thank you, everyone. All right, closing items. Thank you for the work through those policies. Closing items, public comment 3.01. We have some maybe, if we have some that's come in, please, let's read those names as well, okay?
Chris King.
King?
King.
King. Welcome, Mr. King. We'll have you right over here, sir. Thank you. Mm-hmm. You'll have 3 minutes. We'll get your microphone on, and then we'll get you started.
Okay.
Okay, oh, wait, there you go. Good.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I come to you as a parent of a third grader at Roland Milton Elementary School and as a local resident of the community. On our first day of classes, it was a fantastic experience, especially after the last the last 18 months of distance learning and all of the workload therein. It was a relief to be able to have our son back at school. One thing we did notice, though, was that there is no social distancing at all within our classrooms. After following through some of the procedures around contacting our teachers, they referred me to the reopening policy or the reopening document that was published sometime over the summer. We saw that not only was there no mention of social distancing, but apparently in practice there is no push to even adopt any sort of social distancing messaging or social distancing policy within each class. So either by design or just by practice, this is not in place. In the meantime, two things have happened since that document was published. One, we're seeing a large spike both locally and nationally in terms of the Delta variant. And two, we're bringing together large populations, or small populations, I should say, of unvaccinated local residents, our kids, in the classroom. So I would share these observations with you. We can share all sorts of statistics. You all watch the statistics come through, both from the state health department as well as the governor's office. There's a dashboard that's broadly shared. But I would ask that, considering the changes that we've seen recently, the age of the policy and the conditions that it was drafted in, I too was optimistic at that point, that it's time to make a change. And there are a few things that I would recommend in the short time that I have left. Number one, to reinstate the 3-foot social distancing policy. That may or may not be practical. In my conversation, or my email conversation with Trustee Nicolette, she cited that the capacity of the rooms was probably going to be a deterrent to that. But given this current situation, to revisit that policy. Number two, provide plexiglass partitions. I realize that both of those two suggestions require money. It doesn't grow on trees, and right now, frankly, I think they'd be on fire. I would also ask that I would suggest that there are some free solutions available to us. One is potentially a daily social distancing reminder. We may not be able to get 3 feet, but 2.5 feet is better than 1. And finally, Trustee Nicolette noted that there was a number of different factors that you use to make your decisions on what our policy should be, and that I would like to see that matrix published in terms of what factors, what metrics do you use to change policies and to make that available to the public. And with that, I'll close my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. King.
Shannon Coley.
Welcome, Ms. Coley.
The purpose of our public school system is to educate our youth for success in their adulthood, to arm them with skills to solve problems and think critically. It is to foster personal responsibility and teach them facts, not opinions. Is it your responsibility or your right to install biased social morality to our children, or is it the families, even if it is morally incongruent with your standards? This is why we have separation of church and state. It does not matter that you believe you are on the righteous side of this debate. That is simply your interpretation. You are the government, here to teach our children academics. And I will keep saying this until I am heard. This perpetual lie from social justice advocates is that this is about teaching true, non-whitewashed history. That is an absolute fallacy. Please reread your benchmark curriculum. It's not about history. If it was about teaching historical truth, there would be zero pushback. It's not as if Google doesn't exist. There is no hiding our failures or mistakes as a country. This equity train has created mass psychosis. Social justice has become priority number one in our schools. Actual academics have taken a back seat. Social justice will now permeate every subject beginning in kindergarten through graduation. We are quadrupling down on this divisive, opinion-based narrative. The premise of your massive equity and diversity department says it is created to address the achievement gap among diverse population of students. Do you believe pushing social justice curriculum will narrow that gap? Will teaching about the oppressed and the privileged class narrow that gap? Is this their solution? Diversity and inclusion should elevate minority voices and teach tolerance. Your social justice lessons do none of those things. In no way do they address the achievement gap. There is no concept of been suggested in the lessons. In fact, they do the opposite. Could you imagine if we taught math and English, math and social studies, math and science for 13 years, day after day, week after week, year after year? What would we create? Mathematicians. Could you imagine if we taught science and math, science and English, science and social studies for 13 years? We would create scientists. What do you think teaching social justice in math and English and social studies. Teaching social justice in math, English, social studies will get you a social justice warrior. Is this the purpose of our public schools? It absolutely seems like that's what you want. Create leaders, create innovators, create artists, create thinkers, create a positive change. Don't do this.
Thank you, Ms. Coley.
John Eppolito.
Welcome back, Mr. Eppolito.
Thank you. My name is John Eppolito from ProtectNevadaChildren.org. The site focuses on issues with Infinite Campus. In response to Trustee Nicolette's comments at the last meeting, 1, more people are paying attention to the actions of this board than I've seen in the 12 years that I've been involved. And that's a good thing. Parents and community members are very frustrated with the fact that this board continues to ignore us. Instead of showing you may start listening, President Taylor and the superintendent made it worse by silencing parents who are already frustrated. They did that by removing the initial general public comments. I know of 12 open meeting law complaints that have been filed with the Nevada Attorney General. Only one is from Protect Nevada Children. Washoe County School District Administrative Regulation 5161, Gender Identity and Gender Nonconformity Students. This regulation, and quote from paragraph 5A3, is posted on our private Facebook page, Protect Nevada Children. Quote, staff must be mindful of the confidentiality and privacy rights of students when contacting parents, guardians, so as to not reveal, imply, or refer to a student's actual or perceived sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression, end quote. So if a first grader reveals to his teacher that he should have been born into a girl's body, the teacher is supposed to keep that from parents, correct? On a related note, a student from McQueen High School came to the last board meeting and told you all his U.S. history teacher told students she would be spending a lot of class time focusing on BLM and LGBTQ issues. The next day, the student withdrew himself from school, in part because of the teacher's comments. This board has been ignoring the community and parents like me for years. Many parents have left the district. But now, under Superintendent McNeil's leadership, the district has taken this to a new level. Now the district is ignoring and alienating students, like those mentioned above. You all are here to educate all students, not just students with the same political ideology as Kristen and Angie. It's time for the community forum President Taylor and Trustee Rodriguez have suggested. Will this board please spend more time on attempting to improve education for all students and less time on all these issues that divide us? You can find us at protectnevadachildren.org or our private Facebook page, Protect Nevada Children. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eppolito.
Valerie Fianaka.
Welcome, Ms. Fianaka.
Hi, guys. This one?
No, you're on. You're already on.
Okay. It's kind of opportune that you're talking about the drug policy. I hadn't really intended to talk to y'all today, but I'm gonna. I'm grateful that the Washoe County Commission today recognized Opioid Awareness Month. It should be opioid awareness every day. Statistics say almost 1,000 people die in Washoe County annually from opioid overdose, but this does not take into account deaths classified as suicides, many of which are caused by opioids. I know for a fact that this is a huge problem in Washoe County School District. How do I know? Personal experience. My youngest son became addicted to opioids following hospitalization for a horrible snowboarding accident. This rapidly progressed to heroin. He quit TMCC High School 2 months before his graduation. He was an A and B student his entire life. He was a drum major at Spanish Springs High School and won All-State playing the tuba of all instruments. Weird, but he was really good at it. He was in student leadership in middle school and high school, all 4 years. After multiple treatment failures, he committed suicide with heroin after calling home to tell me he loved me. We need more of an opioid awareness month. Instead of concentrating so much attention, on children's pronouns and their sexuality, perhaps the 45 additional counselors we've hired could spend a majority of their time trying to keep kids drug-free and alive in this district.
Thank you, Ms. Fiannaca. I'm so sorry for I can't even imagine your loss. I'm so sorry.
That's all.
Thank you. Okay, that's it for our agenda. Next meeting, next policy committee meeting, September 21st, 2 p.m. right here. Our meeting is adjourned.